Dawn of the Dead, The Survivor. Early September 2018. It's been 2.5 weeks since the whole zombie outbreak had begun, and everything was going to hell. Now, many people were huddled in their homes trying to survive. Trying to survive the onslaught of the recently dead coming back to life and attacking the living. How it all began, nobody knew. The cause, the Venus probe, an unknown radiation that had yet to be discovered by scientists, had come to Earth when the probe was detonated in the upper atmosphere by concerned NASA scientists. This radiation had mutated the human nervous system and caused those who died from any cause, to come back and attack the living. Well, now we join one man, locked in his house like many people trying to survive. His name was Theodore Johansson, Teddy to his friends. Well, Teddy was an average man in his mid-30s. He had a good job. He had a normal life. He exercised his Second Amendment rights and owned firearms. He was not a firearm freak, but he had a few for self-defense. But he didn't know he was going to use them for this kind of defense. Well, for Teddy, his story was like many. He was at his job at a local hospital when it all began. He heard reports of a race riot within the city. This city was Orlando, Florida, known to many as Mickey Mouse Land for those who came to the attractions. Also, Orlando hosted several other theme parks, SeaWorld, Universal Studios, and the Holy Land experience for the religious. Well, that was in the morning when he heard about these race riots, which was perplexing. A riot in the city of Orlando? Then, by the afternoon in his shift, he heard about the widespread violence up and down the eastern seaboard. Very concerning. And he heard the descriptions of the assailant, people within a trance-like state. Well, at the hospital he worked at, before the end of his shift, the hospital went on lockdown. Nobody was leaving. All the employees were stuck there, even non-essential ones like Teddy. Teddy was not going to stay at the hospital. He wanted to be home. He wanted to protect his property, and he wanted to protect his family. Teddy was a part of what they call the boomerang generation. He lived on his own for a while, but then he couldn't afford the ever skyrocketing rent and moved back in with his parents. And his parents were on his mind, of course. They were elderly, and he wondered how they were doing during this crisis. Well, he tried his damnedest to call the house, but the landlines were making a weird noise, and his cell phone died from lack of juice because he didn't have a cord to plug it into a charger. Plus, if he did, the hospital didn't let anyone plug in their phones to recharge it. They were trying to save the energy for the critical stuff like machines and life support units. But Teddy eventually did escape from the hospital. It was hard, but he pulled it off, and he was not the only one. Many frustrated employees did too. The journey home was very perilous. It was utter mayhem in the streets. But as he got home, to his shock, his parents were not home. Their car was not in the driveway, and another surprise was his neighborhood was quiet. There was no zombies or nothing. So Teddy ran into the house, plugged in his cell phone, searched for any sign of his parents, any notes they could have left. He even checked the answering machine for any messages. The answering machine was full of messages from frantic family friends trying to reach them before the lines went down. Well, Teddy did fortify the house. His father had installed hurricane shutters in the windows, and Teddy quickly put them down, secured them, and he turned on the TV, pulled out the guns that he had, and pulled out his dad's guns that his dad had, and even pulled out a ham radio, a hobby his dad had and enjoyed. Now, 2.5 weeks later, we join Teddy as he's exploring the house of one of his neighbors, Mrs. Blaylock, a neighbor who's 10 years older than his parents, a neighbor he knew since he was a kid, and the neighbor he lost contact with for the last couple days. He worried. Mrs. Blaylock's house was next door to his and accessible through his backyard, as her backyard connected to his backyard. The backyard to his house was quiet. The gates were well fortified, the zombies can get through, and the gates to Mrs. Blaylock's house were fortified too. They couldn't get through to her backyard either. So Teddy climbs over the fence. He has his shotgun, and he has a burlap sack, just in case the worst happened. She's either dead, turned, or eaten. And if that happened, he would collect her supplies for himself. So he reaches to the back door of Mrs. Blaylock's house. He gently opens the back door to Mrs. Blaylock's house. As Teddy enters the back door into the house, he screams, "Mrs. Blaylock! Mrs. Blaylock! It's Teddy! Are you here, Mrs. Blaylock?" He quietly goes around the corners, pointing his gun first, just in case there was a zombie there. Everything was quiet. Then he makes his way to the living room, and there he sees Mrs. Blaylock on the ground. Mrs. Blaylock was dying. She was sick with pulmonary fibrosis, and due to the fact that her medications ran out, thus causing her condition to worsen, and to make matters worse, she was on oxygen, and all the tanks had long since ran out. And Teddy screams, "Oh no, Mrs. Blaylock, no!" He runs over to her. She was laying on her stomach. He gently rolls her onto her back as she had labored breathing. She says, struggling to breathe and struggling to talk, Teddy, do me a favor. Kill me. For the love of God, kill me. I don't want to become a zombie, and I don't want to die like this. Please, Teddy, for the love of God, kill me." And Teddy says, "No, Mrs. Blaylock, no. I'll wait till you die, then I'll do the deed." Then Mrs. Blaylock says, "No, do it. You don't know the agony I'm going through. I can't breathe. I can't breathe in my misery." Teddy was like, I can't, Mrs. Blaylock, I can't. You're still alive." Mrs. Blaylock says, "Teddy, please." Then Teddy relents and he says, "Oh dear God. Oh dear God, forgive me." He says, "Forgive me." He says repeatedly as he grabs the shotgun and he pulls the trigger. The deed was done. The shotgun destroyed Mrs. Blaylock's head, but also the shotgun blast alerted the zombies were outside on the front lawn, and he could hear them pounding on the steel-shuttered windows. Teddy quickly begins cleaning out her kitchen, taking out all the canned goods and putting them inside his burlap sack. Then he cleans out the fridge. He grabs a garbage bag and fills up the garbage bags with food from the refrigerator. He also decides to take her silverware and other metallic objects in the house, and he found her pistol. He took her old pistol and the box of bullets. Afterwards, he makes his way home. He climbs the fence into his backyard and runs into the back door, locks the back door, and puts the board over it. Then he goes into the kitchen, puts everything on the counter, and then begins to cry for Mrs. Blaylock. After Teddy was done mourning, then he goes to his computer and he turns on the camera and he begins making a video journal. And he says to the camera, "Video journal entry number 125. Today, I went to check on a neighbor who I knew since I was a little boy. A neighbor who me my parents loved dearly, Mrs. Blaylock. Unfortunately, she was a sick woman with lung problems. And of course, with the way things are right now, her medicines ran out and her oxygen ran out. I found her dying. I was going to wait till she died. Then I would give her the headshot. But instead, with her dying breath, she begged me to end her life, to end the misery. She was going through agony, not being able to breathe. And I did. It was the hardest thing I ever had to do so far. Then Teddy ends the video journal by showing a picture of his parents, and he says, well, I'm going to do this for the millionth time, guys and girls watching this, and I plead to you, if anybody have seen this couple, their names are Frank and Martha Johansson, please reach me on the comment section or my email or on the radio. And then he gives his radio ID and he says, ending the video journal, good luck everybody, Godspeed, and keep fighting. And he turns off the camera and he does some edits to the video and loads it on YouTube on his account. All his video journals had high number of views. It was still a miracle that there was still internet. It was another miracle that they still had electricity and running water in his area, while many places had none. And it was also miraculous that he still had cell service. Cell service was sporadic. It was still hard to make phone calls, but he still had internet access. He at least was thankful for that. The next morning, Teddy decides to live stream on Twitch. He was not live streaming a game. He was live streaming how to make bullets. He had turned the utility room in the back of the house into a workshop. He had moved everything from the shed into the utility room, even his dad's bullet making equipment. And he was live streaming how to make bullets using all the silverware and other scrap metals he found in Mrs. Blaylock's house. As he was showing how to make bullets and everything, he says, and voila, ladies and gentlemen, bullets now for your guns. And then he picks up the picture of his parents and he says, ladies and gentlemen, before I end the stream, if any of you who are watching this live in the Central Florida area, he shows their picture, please tell me on the comments section, or you could contact me on the radio. I put my radio ID on the page. Please. Their names are Frank and Martha Johansson. Once again, their names are Frank and Martha Johansson. Please contact me with anything about them. Thank you. And good luck out there, everybody. Then he clicks off the Twitch account, and then he closes his laptop and turns off his camera, and he goes back into the living room. He sits down and watches TV. Of course, television during a zombie outbreak was nothing but news on what was going on. The local news had talking heads debating and talking about what was going on and what to do, and getting into violent arguments from time to time. Then he changed to the religious channels, and the religious channels were saying, this is the end of the world, ladies and gentlemen, repent now, repent now. Then he changes to the international news. CNN was announcing that they were waiting for the president to speak, and he turned to Fox News. Fox News was repeating the same thing. Then he turned it back to the local channel. News 13 had several people talking and arguing about the outbreak and what to do. He also was reading the ticker beneath the screen, which was telling news that the outbreak of the undead has finally reached the West Coast, and there has been reported zombie sightings in Canada, Central, South America, and Africa. It seemed to be getting worse by the minute. And the men that were arguing was some local talk show personality that was well known in the city, and some biologist who works for the government. The biologist was named Dr. Anthony L. Thurston. Dr. Thurston was explaining that the government has ordered that any bodies of the recently deceased to be turned over to specially equipped units of the National Guard for proper disposal. But then suddenly, the image of the biologist on screen cut away to one of the News 13 anchor ladies saying, "We'll return to our show in a few moments. Right now we have breaking news as the president is speaking." Then they cut to the president talking from some sort of secured area, just like every politician, hiding out somewhere in some secured bunker, said Teddy to himself out loud. Then the president speaks, gives some gibberish about, how this country is going to persevere, how this country has been through some dark times in its past. But like Teddy said out loud to the TV, what dark times? This is different. This is not the Depression. This is not World War I and II. This is not the LA riots. Then the president says, "Effective immediately, I have signed an executive order extending the martial law. Now, no citizen may occupy the private residence, no matter how safe and secure and well stocked they are. The National Guard, along with the police and fire department, are setting up evacuation zones within the city centers of every major city of this country. You are now to report to an evac zone, and if you are unable to, the police and the National Guard will come and take you." When Teddy saw that in the news, he says, "God damn it, come on, government, quit doing stupid crap, man." Then he runs over to the ham radio, and he calls the radio ID of a friend that he met on the radio, a man who only calls himself Seaver. He didn't know who Seaver was and what Seaver did for a living or what Seaver was doing during this problem, but the two formed a good close friendship over the airwaves, and it seems Seaver was trying to make his way to Orlando. As he called Seaver, Seaver's voice crackles through the speakers, saying,
"Well, hey there, buddy. How's it going, man?"
Teddy says that he was doing fine, and he explained to Seaver what he saw on the TV. Seaver acknowledges that he saw the president's speech on TV and says to Teddy,
"Yeah, man, I was expecting that to happen. We're just now reaching the city limits of Orlando. It took us 3 days to get here from Tampa. There's nothing but death and destruction along the way. We have been avoiding zombies and the idiot militarized police trying to force a martial law that's pointless."
Then Seaver goes on to say,
"We're going to be in your neck of the woods in about maybe 2 days, Teddy, and I extend the invitation for you to join us. You might as well do it before the government tries to take you away."
Teddy replies back, "I'll think about it. Over and out, buddy." Then Seaver says over and out back to him. Then Teddy decides to climb onto the roof. As he climbs onto the roof, he goes on to the attic, and there within the attic he cut a hole in the roof where he could climb out and see the 360 view of the neighborhood. And of course, there was nothing but destruction. He could hear the sound of distant gun battles. It was punctuated with the sounds of distant police sirens, people screaming, and the sound of the undead in his front yard just roaming about. Teddy looks at the undead horde shambling about in his front yard. He had noticed the pattern for the last couple days. The houses that had people in it still, the zombies were there in their front yard, backyard. They didn't secure their fencing, waiting for them, trying to get inside to get to them. While the houses that had nobody in it, there was no activity at all except for a few stray zombies wandering about or the zombies entering in and out freely with no problem. So they knew which houses still had people. Teddy looked at the sky. The sky was black as an ominous storm was building. Suddenly there was a bright flash of lightning and a loud crash of thunder. Then Teddy had noticed something after that big bolt of lightning and loud crash of thunder. It scared the zombies. The zombies that were shambling around his front yard began to retreat. So were the zombies in the other yards of inhabited houses. Then Teddy says aloud to himself, "My God, they're scared." Or do they remember? Some sort of residual memory that when a storm comes, they take shelter. The question is, where they're going to take shelter. The zombies were quickly ambling along, taking shelter where they could find, usually in the deserted houses. He was amazed. Teddy was truly amazed. They were fearful of the storm. But there was also a sign for him to get his butt back inside. So Teddy goes back in to the attic and he puts the makeshift cover so the rain doesn't get in. And goes back down to the main house. He then gets on the internet quickly before the storm got too strong, and he reported his findings in a video journal. Afterwards, he shuts down everything and hopes that the power stayed on throughout the storm. And it did. Well, 3 days later, Teddy had got back out onto the roof. The dead were back out in his front yard. But he also heard the distant sound of gunfire. There was a battle, but he also heard that gunfire was getting closer, and he heard large vehicles coming. He realized what it was. It was the police and the National Guard collecting citizens who stayed in their home and ignored the evacuation order. He says to himself aloud as he saw from the roof, "God damn it!" They were at his neighbor's house 3 doors down. He knew the neighbor there, and he knew the neighbor was well armed, and he was not going to go down without a fight, and it would buy him time to get his stuff together and get out. Well, he climbs back into the attic and gets back into the house. He gets on the radio and contacts Seaver. Seaver's voice comes through the speaker saying,
"Hey buddy, what's going on?"
Teddy explains his ordeal, what was going on, how the government forces were 3 doors down from him, and they were pretty much mowing down the zombies to get to his neighbor's house. Then Seaver says,
"Well, we just found my sister. She's alive and well. We're up around a road called State Road 436. You know where that is?"
Teddy says, "Yeah, I know where that is. I'm going to try to, I don't have a vehicle, but I'm going to try to go up Curry Ford Road, which goes through 436. If you could find me there and get me, I'll much appreciate it," said Teddy. Then Seaver says on the radio,
"I see the road you're talking about. Which direction do I go? East or west?"
Teddy says to Seaver, "Go west. You'll see me. I'm going to be wearing jeans, a Red Wings t-shirt, and denim jacket, and I'll have whatever I can carry with me. I got brown hair, kind of thinning on top, and I lost a lot of weight, so you'll see me. But first things first, I need to clear the area so I can get out safely." As the police and the National Guard were at the neighbor's house, and the captain of the police was on the bullhorn telling the occupants of the house that they secured the area and they can drop down their weapons and come out peacefully, and there's no charges facing them. The neighbor knew that was a load of horse crap and decided to fight. And, of course, the fight ended with the police and National Guard winning, mowing him down. They were taking his family and stuffing him inside the giant police vans. Well, Teddy had everything ready. He had jerry-rigged the house with a booby trap, just in case he needed to leave it. And he opens the door wide open, and he takes an old boombox and blasts some loud music to draw the zombies towards the house. Well, the zombies were ambling towards the house, and they finally made it through the open door. The zombies start coming into the house, searching around for any living thing to eat. Well, the zombie group made it into the kitchen, and they saw propane tanks, and they saw a makeshift fuse and the hissing sound of gas leaking. Suddenly, the fuse makes it to the escaping propane gas, and then there was a loud explosion. Teddy's house was completely destroyed. He looked back at the flaming homestead with a few tears running down his eyes, but also the explosion drew the attention of the police and National Guard. They go towards his house, and the captain looks and he says, "Forget it, let's keep on moving." And the police and National Guard move on to the other inhabited homes. So Teddy finally made his way to Curry Ford Road, and it was a challenge. There were zombies all over the place, but they were scattered. And they were slow moving and uncoordinated, and he was fast moving and coordinated. Like he always said to himself, they're so slow he could walk past them, and indeed he did, to save energy. And it was a horror show on the main road. There were crashed cars all over the place. There were cars that were on fire all over the place. He could hear the distant sound of firefights, and he could hear a few helicopters flying overhead. So Teddy makes his way to a major intersection, and he's noticing that dusk is coming, and he knew that was the dangerous time. When it's dark, he's not going to be able to see the zombies well. Plus, there were not many street lights on. As he was beginning to run down the road, he is spotted by someone with binoculars. That person watching him with the binoculars said, "Hey, Seaver, I think we found your friend," just as he described himself. Seaver says, "Alright, let's go get him quickly." Well, as a group of zombies begin to surround Teddy, Teddy quickly pulls out a road flare. He turns on the road flare, and the bright lights of the road flare, the hissing sound, and the heat emanating from the road flare begins to frighten the zombies as he begins waving it at them, frightening them. As he pulls back, suddenly he hears the sound of motorcycles, powerful engine, and another powerful engine pulling right up. Well, the men on the motorcycle were armed with bladed weapons like machetes and began lopping the zombie's head off. There was a van, and then there was a jeep with a giant supercharger blower sticking out through the hood. And there was a man with a machine gun on the back, fastened, mowing down the zombies. After subduing the threat, the door of the old 40 Econoline van opens up, and a man in his mid-40s, decked out in motorcycle gear, steps out. He had a leather jacket with a giant rebel flag on it and some other symbols on it, and it said Sons of the South. Teddy knew what Sons of the South were. They were a very well-known motorcycle gang, and it seems that Seaver was a part of it. And the two shook hands, and Seaver says, "Well, well, Teddy Johansson, it's finally nice to meet you. My name is Lars Seaver." And then a young blonde-haired woman steps out. She was in her late 20s, early 30s. Lars Seaver says, "This is my sister Lorelei. We just found her." And then Teddy says, "Thanks, man. Thanks for saving me." Seaver says, "No problem, man. Just get in the van. We're getting the hell out of here now. We're going to rendezvous with the others." Well, the small group of men finally rendezvous with the rest of the motorcycle gang at the Sedanos parking lot on 436. And of course, they were cleaning out the grocery store and the surrounding stores. Seaver and Teddy and Lorelei step out the van, and Seaver introduces Teddy and his sister Lorelei to the rest of the gang. And afterwards, Seaver gives us inspirational speech, tells them we have to just move on and get the hell out of the state now that they found what they needed to find. So everyone gets onto their motorcycles and other vehicles and begin the trek to leave the state. In the van, Teddy asks Lorelei, "So Lorelei, are you leaving anyone behind?" Lorelei says, "No, my parents died a couple years ago, and Lars is my only family left." and he's always looked out for me. And then she asked the same thing to Teddy. What about you? Are you leaving anyone behind? Teddy says, I'm leaving a lot behind. I'm leaving memories behind. And I hope my parents are still alive. If they are, I'm leaving them behind. Lorelai says, don't worry. If your parents are just like you, who survived this long, I'm sure they'll survive this whole ordeal, however long it lasts, said Lorelai to Teddy. Teddy says, I hope so. It's just not knowing what happened to them is what hurts. But, hey, like you said, we got to survive, and I'm ready, as Teddy pulls out his shotgun and looks out the back window of the van and just sees as the areas that were familiar to him were getting more and more distant as they were traveling to the future of the unknown. What was going to happen from here on was just up to them and how they were going to survive, and who knew how long this ordeal was going to last. Epilogue. 3 weeks after the zombie outbreak, Teddy looks at the YouTube channels and sees the people who willingly went with the evacuation to the fortified city centers, and they all said the same thing. It was a mistake. The government took their supplies and took their weapons and ammunition, and those who were taken by force said that the government took their supplies and their weapons and ammunition. It was all a mistake, as one video game reviewer that Teddy always watched for years was saying, well, I made the stupid mistake of going with the evacuation orders. I was comfortable in my house. I had everything, even though we were surrounded by the living dead. And now I'm in some dump that's cramped with my wife and my kid. And that's the reason why I heeded the orders, because I had my wife and kid to look after. We were better off at the house. Well, Teddy gets off that channel, and then he starts making a video journal entry. And he says, video journal entry 131. It's been 3 weeks since the zombie outbreak happened, and the crap is hitting the fan all over the place. Unfortunately, because the government decided to be stupid like the government always does, they decided to get people out of their homes no matter how safe and secure they were. Well, I was not going to let them do that to me. They were not going to cage me up like an animal and take all the stuff that I accumulated and worked hard to get, my weapons, my ammunition, my supplies, so they could keep it for themselves. Well, anyways, he says, that's over now, and I've had to leave my home. But I found a new home with a motorcycle gang. Some of you might know them as the Sons of the South. We've been kind of pillaging and looting our way across the state. We're trying to make it out to Georgia and try to make it out west to the wilderness to survive this whole ordeal. I found a new girl now. She's a couple years younger than me, and we get along great. And I get along great with the leader of this gang. He's almost like a big brother to me now. And then Teddy says, this is Teddy Johansson signing off. And he says, oh, before I sign off, and who knows how long the next journal entry will be, Mom, Dad, if you're seeing this, I'm okay. I hope you're okay too. And he says, you would like Lorelai. She's a good girl, even though her brother is the leader of a biker gang. But anyways, Mom, Dad, if you're out there, I love you. Goodbye. Like and subscribe. The end.